Bang.
There was a great dramatic pause there. What is it?
183.
83. All right. Nice. Well, we're on a roll. We're rolling, man. We're in the summertime now. My son's birthday was yesterday, so he's not too far from John, actually having a great time. But now the beginning of summer begins, and the longest day of the year we just hit yesterday. So now it's downhill from here, John.
Well, pretty soon it will be, because we once we get to the 4th of July, Pete, I always figure not only are we past the halfway point of the year, but we're halfway through the summer, which when I used to live in the cold weather climes like Minnesota and Illinois, that used to mean something. Down here, Pete, it doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean a damn thing. You guys are 85 and sunny every damn day.
Every day. Every day.
Well, and I will say this. I had a clerk named Chris. What the heck was Chris's last name, John? Oh, shoot. He's from Notre Dame, a receiver, great guy, like a Hall of Fame type level guy at Notre Dame, played in the NFL for a while. But he used to look at me, John, and he goes, Jesus, it's July. The summer's over. And I'm like, really? Did you remember there's a July and August? Let's not go too far too fast, man. Chris Haynes.
Yep. If anybody that doesn't know who he is, like Pete said, he made one of the most famous catches in Notre Dame history in the Cotton Bowl when Joe Montana brought him back, I think against Houston, Pete?
Yeah, I think one of the Texas schools down in Texas. Yep, Cotton Bowl.
In the Cotton Bowl, and he laid out for a pass that Joe threw horribly into the corner, and he had to stretch all the way out. And that's not a rip on Joe, because he brought him back from 3 touchdowns or maybe more down. It was pretty much like, Brady against the Falcons, Pete.
Yeah. Well, and John, I actually think Joe Montana on that play, I think he was trying to just get rid of it. He was not even hoping somebody'd catch it. He was just like, the hell with this. And Haynes lays straight out. I mean, it is worth a YouTube. Take a look at it, folks. Chris Haynes catch in the Cotton Bowl. It'll pop up like that.
Yep. One of the best of all time, and great martial artist and wonderful friend. Great guy, Chris Haynes. All right, Pete and everybody, welcome back to episode 183 of The Rebel's Edge. We always appreciate you guys coming in and telling your friends about the show. We've got Jared handling all of the graphics that you see, including that robot. Is that robot bullish or bearish is my question.
I can't tell.
When he's got surfing, bulls or snowboarding bears, I kind of know which way he's leaning, but the robot, it just looks like a happy robot, I guess.
That happy robot makes money on the way up and the way down.
That's a happy trader there.
Bang. All right, let's dive into the macro minute, Pete.
Yep.
I'm going to say the macro minute is Bank of England moving rates up by 0.5 point. For those of you who don't know, this is the 13th consecutive raise that the Bank of England BOE has put in. It's a lot more than our guys, but their inflation's also a lot higher, Pete. It's 8.6% over in the United Kingdom versus 5.3% for the core here in the United States.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the same sort of exact same sort of numbers, except for Powell. Let's just take a look at Powell, John. He goes up there yesterday, starts talking a little bit. Things start to go south a little bit. Today, a little bit more. Things go south again. Basically, what he came out and said was, we're not done raising rates. The markets didn't really like hearing that, John. So there's been some palms out, at least early on. We'll see. Obviously, the markets do move around very rapidly, but that, I think, was pretty macro. And just those few words can send the markets down pretty quickly.
Yeah, especially when you've got the Bank of England walking the walk and talking the talk.
Yeah.
But again, their inflation is far more out of control. So it's understandable that we've done 10 hikes, they've done 13. All right, let's talk about fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
All right, so fantastic futures, Pete. Soybeans, I'm going with. Yeah, it's not something everybody talks about every day, soybeans, but It's in an awful lot of foodstuffs. It's certainly in a lot of the crop that they feed to animals. And the fact that it's up 12% year to date, I think is, again, one of those things worth at least paying attention to. What do you got for futures today?
Yeah, another one worth paying attention to, in my opinion, John, is the 10-year. Now, we don't talk about it each and every day because it gets a little bit boring and monotonous and everything else, but it won't be boring or monotonous if we get above that 3.8 level, John. Whenever we've gotten above like 3.8, people start to get a little bit nervous. People start to put those hands out and get out of stocks, and they start moving over into the bonds and getting to there. There's huge liquidity over there. You go over to the CME, John. In the last year or two, it's gone from 4 million contracts a day or futures and options trading to 5 million. So big numbers, very liquid markets. The 10-year is something worth always at least taking a look at each and every day.
Agreed. It's an indicator, especially the 10-year versus the 2-year, which is the one that most of us cite all the time when we're talking about recession. When the 2-year gets so far above the 10-year. All right, let's talk, Pete, about CDMO. This is Avid. And Avid Pharmaceutical is trading to the, or Bioscience, I get, not pharmaceutical. Avid Bioscience, trading to the downside. Can you imagine a worse report than this, really, Pete? They reported 0 on the bottom line versus $1.65 year over year. Their revenue number was a little better than year over year number, but their guidance was 20 to 30 million worse for the fiscal 2024. That's top line, bottom line, and guidance that suck. What do you have about this one?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And they had a couple positives, John, but you know, they're not enough to defend exactly what's going on today, which is the selling pressure. Their revenue, that was pretty strong. They had record revenue for fourth quarter, for the full year. But as you and I both know, revenue is great, but you got to start making money with that revenue at some point, right? There's got to be some earnings. There's got to be some profits that you're putting in your pockets. That's not happening, as you just pointed out. They have a record backlog. That's great, but you got to start making money. And that's one of the issues that they face right now. You look at their margins dropped from 31% down to 21%. That is never a good thing either. So across the board, there are a lot of negatives. You already pointed a lot of those out. You've got a cash burn that's somewhere close to $70 million. You've got a cash to debt of $120 million. Those are all problems that you've got to somehow work through. Can they work through it? Because if they can't, John, this thing's not done going down. And this thing has a little bit more room, despite the fact that it's not quite at 52-week lows, but it's damn close.
Yeah, well, it's, I think that if you're looking for something to grasp onto, it is, that they are still developing product to that $70 million that Pete talked about, their burn. But they got to start bringing something across the line and make somebody interested in taking them out. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just going to keep swirling down the drain. Yeah. Let's talk about Spirit Aerosystems, Pete, SPR. Luckily enough, we did have unusual activity in SPR. A week ago, Pete, they said they had a deal with the unions. It turns out that the unions said, not so fast. Maybe we don't have a deal. And for that reason, basically, the machinists union voted to reject the contract and walk out. Now, they are locked out as well as walking out. And this is something that's going to be a problem for these guys. Now, when I say we had unusual activity, I mean, we had buying of puts ahead of this that was pretty darn strong. And the fact that we had those puts, Pete, bang, those puts went almost $5 in the money, which was pretty nice.
Yeah, that is nice. And that's what we're always looking for on these unusual option activities, the upside and downside. People oftentimes forget, you know, there are ways to play the downside. So it's not like the markets, when they are moving to the downside, have changed and there's no opportunity. There is opportunity. And this clearly shows exactly how that can be very profitable at times. What's not profitable, John, is this company. they've got some issues. They got a huge cash burn. They've got a debt of $4 billion. I mean, that's a pretty decent sized number. There's a fairly decent sized short interest, 7%, call it. So when you look at that, there's a lot of things that you scratch your head and you say, hey, look, you got to get your act together. And one of those things that they've got to do is they've got to figure out this contract. I think this caught some people off guard to some degree. And that's something that cannot happen. They've got to get this done. They've got to work it out with the workers. If not, they are going to keep on swirling, and Boeing and some of the other big boys out there, Airbus, they're not going to be very happy about what's going on, because they do work very closely with these groups, and they've got to deliver. And if they're not delivering, that's going to be a major problem.
By the way, Pete, just for the viewers that don't follow our work as closely, those puts, the July 28 puts, they were $2 out of the money. They went $3 are in the money today.
Wow.
And they traded all the way up to, I think, $2.50 from 80 cents yesterday. So let's call that a triple.
Yeah, it's not
not a 10x, but
not
a triple. 10X. And once again, if you were somebody like what Pete and I do, folks, by buying the 30, the at the money put, and then selling as it dropped today, lower strike puts against it, you could make even more money in that kind of a trade. But again, we can't trade for you, folks. We can just cite the activity, and then you guys make the decision if it's appropriate for you to make that investment.
Sure.
All right. Now we've got one that's on everybody's tongue almost every day. Amazon. Why is it there? Well, because they've got cloud services, because they're out rumored to be buying another supermarket here or there, sort of like they did with Whole Foods in the United States. And today they announced that their Prime Days, plural, are going to be the 11th and 12th of July. And Pete, one of your friends at Target has actually decided he's going to be right in the midst of that, which I would say is not a good move on his part.
It may not be, John, but I will tell you, that's been going on for a while now. I mean, it seems like Target and others have joined in and tried to make a little bit of some gains off of some of these events that happen that are not necessarily a catalyst of earnings or something else, and they jump into this field. Now, the interesting thing for me, John, about Amazon is this is a company that is, as you said, it's a cloud company. This is all great, right? Everything that they do on the e-commerce side of things is wonderful. But where do they make their money? 75% of their profits come from the cloud, from AWS. That's a big number. They own 32, 33% of that cloud space. So as much as we get excited about this particular news, I think that we also have to focus on the fact of when you look at the PE, it's pretty daggone high. Mark Mahaney said, don't worry about it right now. He's one of the guys in there who is unbelievable. Evercore, he's the analyst there, does a great job. He still loves the company, and he loves the company because, of course, him following it, he knows it's a lot more than an e-commerce company that everybody believes it is. This is a cloud play, guys. That's why the PE is a little bit higher, makes a little bit of sense. It's also why that balance sheet looks the way it is, and it's phenomenal.
Pete, like I say, I'm not trying to rip on your buddy Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, but when he's bracketing, because he's going to be the 9th through the 15th or something like that of July. So he's right. You're going head to head with the biggest e-commerce giant in the world. I think it's a bad move by Target. If I were them, Pete, not that Mr. Cornell asked, but I'll throw it out there. I would wait maybe a week after the Amazon Prime Day rather than being right in the midst of it. And then things people didn't buy during Amazon Prime Day or they missed or whatever. Maybe he can find out which items were the hottest during their Prime sale and discount those to get them as a loss leader in the door, even though it's, the e-commerce door. That's what I would do. I wouldn't do it head to head because 2 of these days he's going to be head to head against them. And you're just going to look bad by comparison. That's just my opinion.
Although I would say this, when it comes to the Black Friday and some of the other, events that we look at very closely when they come up, they're all going against each other. They're all fighting against each other. And then do you want to go before they come out or do you want to go after? As you were saying, maybe going after because you've learned a lot about what the consumer is looking for. But the problem might be, did the consumer already spend his money or her money? I mean, that could be an issue as well. So I understand fully what you're saying. It's tough to compete with these guys for sure, because they have razor thin margins on there. And that's another one of the issues that you're having to face if you want to jump in that water.
Yep. Very, very true, Pete. By the way, I wonder if Cornell's on AWS, if he's on the Amazon cloud, or if he at least is smart enough to be over on maybe Azure instead, or the Google cloud.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Soterra Health, Pete, because this one having a big surge today. They are a global provider of sterilization solutions for lab testing and things like that. So they have this thing called a Sterigenics, which is, you and I have used those, Pete, when we were in the labs for our dad, when you and I both used to work in surgical labs and things like that. Well, apparently they're going to settle with all but 3 of over 880 cases on a class action suit that's in Cook County, Illinois. And because they're settling on obviously a very vast majority, they're getting a pretty nice bump today out of the market. What do you think?
Yeah, settling something like this is always going to be a good thing, John. I think it's an absolute catalyst that's going to give you at least an opportunity, because now that's behind you, right? I mean, now we can move forward, and that's something that I think is huge. It's why the stock's making the kind of move that it's making today. I've seen it up as much as maybe 20% today. I think I know it was up at least 17, but I thought I might have even been over 20% to the upside. In any case, when you look at this company and break it down, and you don't have the headache of what they've just gotten rid of because of this settlement, now you can just say, okay, we've got a company that's got a PE of 18 and they've got a free cash flow of $540 million. That all sounds pretty good to me. That, I think, gives the opportunity for this stock to now finally start to get out of this with the weight hanging on the stock. That's been shed. Now maybe the stock has a little bit more room to the upside. Maybe not just this 20% we're seeing today, but maybe even a much bigger recovery from here. Because of that, I think this is a very, very interesting stock to keep on, at least on your radar.
Yep. Well, it was prior to this ethylene oxide litigation, Pete. This thing was a $20 stock. It fell all the way down to $6, folks. And it's been climbing back up since then. And on this settlement, like Pete said, up 20% today, 5.4 million share turnover versus 890,000 share average trade. So getting back in the right direction is what these guys are doing right now with this settlement. All right, Pete, let's take a look at some sports, shall we?
Yeah, we'll zip through these today, John. There's not a lot out there except the NBA draft is tonight, and that could be pretty daggone interesting. We've got Wembanyama. Now, I know you're a big fan of him, John, because you probably know him like the back of your hand. Yeah, you and me both. But we probably should. The kid's 19 years old. He's 7'4", and he runs the court like he's 6 feet tall. He is an impressive guy, 19 years old. You've got 2 19-year-olds, because then you got a guy in the G League. Old Scoot Henderson is the next one. He's likely to be this number 2. Pretty much everybody expects those 2 to go 1-2, and in that order. But next you've got Alabama, and you've got Brandon Miller. And Alabama had a great basketball team this last year, NCAA tournament. They really ran it. They were unbelievable all year long. Great players. This kid's a great athlete. But they've got the draft tonight. And what I wanted to focus on wasn't so much those guys, although that's impressive. But the problem here is in the NBA and the NHL, and for sure in Major League Baseball, does anybody know who any of these guys are really? I mean, they know a few, right? I mean, you watch the tournaments and you know a few names, but this is the proof is in the pudding, John. And I don't know. I guess when I'm done, I want to hear if you think you've got any kind of a fix. So the NBA, here's the draft numbers. 2, maybe 3 million viewers will watch the NBA draft. The NFL draft set a new record in 2020. They had 15.6 million viewers. As a matter of fact, if you put all 3 days together for 2023 this year, 54 million people watched the NFL draft. So you got day 1, which is just first round, and all of a sudden you start going into the second, whatever. Then you do the rest of it. I mean, It's unbelievable. And they actually continue to get the engagement, John, to get those numbers, 54 million people kind of numbers over the 3-day span. So I don't know if I've got the answer. I certainly don't. I don't know how you figure it out, but there's got to be a way for them to be able to get that a little bit bigger than what it is right now, John. As a matter of fact, I think I told you this, but the NHL Game 5 had lower ratings than my Gophers playing against Syracuse in the Pinstripe Bowl. So these other sports really do struggle when it comes to the viewership, and football just is in command. And I'm not saying that's going to come down at all, but you'd think maybe the NBA, the NHL, and some of the rest of these groups, MLB, would start coming up. They just aren't doing it. Why do you think that is?
Well, let me flip the question around a little bit, Pete, and say that unlike the NFL, basketball has been a little lucky about finding great players, Pete. Like, for instance, the guy that led the Nuggets all the way to and through the playoffs from Serbia.
Yep.
They've got a far more international touch because while I agree 100%, football is America's game, and it has crushed every other sport in its way. Around the world, baseball is still pretty widely played. You may have seen some of that with, players from Finland and obviously Japan and Korea and so forth. But with basketball, you are seeing a whole bunch of great players like Giannis, the kid that went to the Bucks and then played phenomenally and led them to the championship a couple of years ago. And now this kid, like you say, Victor, this kid from France, he's 19 years old. I've seen him playing against competition in France, Pete, which isn't the same as the NBA, of course. No. But I'm not going to say that the kid can't play. He can rain down threes as a 7'3" player. So he is a real phenom. That's why he's going to be the number one pick of the Spurs.
Yep.
But he is skinny as a rail. And we've both seen that if you can't put on the weight, you can't play in the NBA. Manute Bol, how long did that guy last? Yeah, I know he hung around for a while, but he's got to be beefed up. And one of the best things they could probably do for this kid, Pete, is set him down at a Popeyes or something.
I don't think they're going to do that.
Let him pack on some pounds. But he is very, very skinny. But you know who loves him? The shoe companies. And whoever this kid ultimately does a deal with is going to be a very happy shoe company, I think, Pete.
Yep, that is where the money is. I mean, it really is. Michael Jordan proved it, guys. You look at what he made as a player and you look at what he made from Nike, they're a little bit different numbers there. And he's still making it, by the way, even though he's been out of basketball for 10, 20 years now or whatever it is. I mean, it's amazing, but he is MJ too. All right, Major League Baseball. What's really, really interesting is this, John. There are two teams that right now are on an absolute streak. San Francisco has won 10 games in a row. And then you look over at Cincinnati, they've won 11 games in a row. Now, here's what changes and why one, I think, is for real, and the other is just a schmuck who's in a really crappy conference, crappy division, crappy everything. But Cincinnati, I'll tell you what, John, how about this? Their run differential is -14 for the year. So in other words, they've been outscored by 14 runs this year. That doesn't say much about the team, and it says a lot about the fact that these guys have some very big issues with pitching. They've managed to be able to get on this streak, but will this streak last? Number one, probably not. And will they actually get to the playoffs and get past round one? Probably not. Just because you've got to have both sides of the plate, right? You got to have pitching. You've got to have some sort of bats out there. And there are a lot of different teams that this year are doing it on both sides. San Francisco is one of them, John. It's amazing, but these guys have a +54. So their pitchers are doing their job. The batters are doing their job. And as long as I'm on the topic, and you brought it up a minute ago, but we talked about Major League Baseball. By the way, you know who's leading again in Major League Baseball for home runs? Ohtani. He's got 24. He hit a freaking monster shot again. He's batting .292. He's got 58 RBIs. And oh, by the way, last night, 12 strikeouts. I mean, the guy is on fire. Now, he did give up a 1-run home run yesterday. The guy actually got a hold of it. But John, his average pitch is somewhere very close to either 97 or at least 100 miles per hour. I mean, he is absolutely dominating. But what do you think about these teams? Do you think that you can get anywhere if you're Cincinnati, if your pitching doesn't improve? They might have to do some trades.
True. But Abbott, Pete, he had a whole bunch of scoreless. That's one of their top, pitchers who finally got a home run rocked off of him last night. But Jack Wyatt's a friend of mine, Pete. He's the biggest owner, I think, of a team that has several ownership groups as part of it. But Cincinnati is a team that, if, like you say, they can get hot with the bats like San Francisco is and get the pitching up to snuff, they could play pretty well. Yeah. I think at the beginning of the season, Pete, these guys were right around the third worst team in terms of World Series odds. People going to Vegas, putting money down on a team. Who are they putting money down on? Of course. Well, the Mets, the Yankees, maybe the Angels, Pete, and the Dodgers because of their pitching and because of Ohtani. But I think that these guys are a lot better than the third worst, especially this 11-game streak says that they're better than that. So I think you might see a little bit more bright plays out of the Cincinnati Reds because it's a young squad. And they seem to be getting enthusiastic. So I don't want to take anything away from that. Last 16 games, they're 14-2, including, of course, that 11-game streak. And that's a streak that they haven't had since 1957. Pete.
Yeah.
So, yep, I like them, and I'll continue to watch and root for them, just like the Cubs.
Yeah, they're a fun team to watch. It's great to see some of the smaller market teams having some of the success that they've had this year. You've got Tampa, you got Cincinnati, you got Minnesota. They're not doing great, but they're having some success, and most of the time they've been leading the year. So when you see these smaller markets and you see some of what's been going on, it's pretty refreshing, actually. And it's great to see that the Yankees are pretty far off the Rays, and the Mets and all of these different teams. It does show you that there is a lot more great players out there. And if you can find them and you can get them playing the right way for you, for the right money, you don't have to spend the kind of money that the big boys are putting out there to be successful. And I think that's something that a lot of these teams are going to start actually recognizing that that's the fact.
I agree. They are. They've done a lot of things. You've cited it here on the show about what they've done right about bringing more fan support into Major League Baseball, the pitch clock and all that kind of stuff. Thank God, because they needed it. But also, when a team gets on a streak like this, I guarantee you, my buddy Jack Wyatt again, Pete, is a happy camper. Because nothing will put butts in seats like a streak. Yep. And congratulations, Jack. I'm sure you're smiling over there in Cincinnati or wherever you're traveling to today. All right. Pete and I will be back next Monday. We don't do the show on Friday, as you guys know, so we'll be back Monday. We hope you guys join us then. Have a great day. And check out marketrebellion.com when you get a chance.